Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Record Rangers podcast. I'm Scott McDermott, as ever, joined by my colleague Andy Newport. Andy, we're no long back for the Rangers press conference today, pre-match presser ahead of Dundee United at Tannadice on Wednesday night. We both spoke to Danny Rohl and Emmanuel Fernandez. Some interesting stuff from both, but we'll start with the manager. He was obviously getting quizzed on the January transfer window, what he needs, how many he needs. What do you think his kind of responses and what he said today?
Well, it was myself who asked him how many he needs, and he was at sort of pains to avoid answering that. One of our colleagues went back in later on in the presser, so I had another nibble at that topic, and he was basically saying, listen, it's not about numbers, it's about quality. And while I agree with that, I do think you could certainly put a number on it, and it's probably about 9 or 10 if he was being brutally honest. Listen, this is a Rangers team that, there's barely a position in it where they could do an upgrade. I mean, you could arguably say that the only guy who sort of held his head high for the majority of the season is Jack Butland. The rest, every other single position could do with not just an upgrade, but a drastic upgrade. So, yeah, I mean, he was obviously, he revealed that he's in sort of constant dialogue almost with Andrew Kavanagh every couple of days. They talk, and also Andrew Kavanagh, the chairman, will be flying back into Glasgow in the next few days for further discussions ahead of the January window. But listen, we all know how difficult this January window can be just to get guys in. You know that yourself, Scott, that it's a notoriously problematic window to get value for money. They're going to have to somehow, though, get guys in that can see them through at the end of the season. Because right now, I mean, you're looking at, especially this month's fixtures, a list of games that there's literally no guarantees that Rangers would win these games. They've been so far off it in terms of an attacking sense. Yes, Danny Rohl's come in and stabilised things defensively as much as it was a frankly dismal display at the weekend. At least it was a clean sheet. I think that's what Danny Rohl would take, and that'll be the one sort of slight positive he can take from Sunday's game against Falkirk. But a team that last year was berated for its lack of cutting edge has somehow managed to have 60 goals taken out of it in terms of Cyril Dessers, Hamza Gamani and Václav Černý, and the people that have come in to replace them are providing literally next to nothing right now in an attacking sense. So that's where, for me, they need to really focus. They need a proper centre forward. They need a creative midfielder, whether it be a winger or a number 10. I still think they could do with another centre back, especially in news today. But Nasser Giga are going to be heading off on an international break. So that's fine for me with the phone going off. Apologies. So I think they're, I mean, 3 at the very minimum. But I think that you could be doubling that, trebling that figure if you were being ambitious. But that's just where they really are.
It's interesting, though, for me, listening to Danny Rohl today, and it's a few times he's done it. He's talking about the window, and he's talking about him and Andrew Kavanagh being in dialogue about what's needed. There's no mention of Dan Purdy, who's the technical director. There's no mention of Robbie Thelwell, who's head of recruitment. No mention of Nathan Fisher, head of scouting. That tells me that, with the vacuum being there, with no Kevin Thelwell, no Patrick Stewart, no sporting director, no chief exec, this window's going to be real interesting. This, to me, is going to be a Danny Rohl window. It sounds as if he's working directly with the owner and the chairman on what he thinks is needed. And I must admit, given where Rangers are at the minute, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, even if it is just for this window, because as you say, they're in such a state at the minute in terms of the lack of quality in that squad and the kind of imbalance of the squad. I think in this window, Danny Rohl has to take ownership of it, has to take control of it. Now, we don't know. We don't think there'll be loads of money to spend. We're led to believe that they're going to be in the window, which to me means they'll try and get people out as well as getting people in. But I've just got a feeling this window is going to belong to Danny Rohl, in terms of it's going to be players that he identifies, maybe even he knows, maybe even he trusts or has worked with before. He was very specific today in saying they need players who understand what playing for Rangers is all about and can handle that pressure, that scrutiny, that intensity. I think he's going to be really, really specific in terms of the guys that come in, and they're going to. I think he'll be bringing them in to immediately get into the first team and immediately make an impact.
Can I just ask, Scott? I mean, do you think it's a risk in trusting this process in the hands of one man? I mean, we saw that with Michael Beale. He was given the keys to the castle a few years ago, and I mean, his window was pilloried at the time. You look back and it doesn't look so bad compared to what's happened this year. But I mean, I remember being in a briefing with some figures of the club a few years ago, John Bennett, the chairman at the time, and they were discussing the desire to get away from having everything in the hands of one man. That's why they wanted to build this system, this set up behind the scenes where the board would have oversight of transfers. They would play a part. They would quiz every element of a recruitment process. You'd have a sporting director there. You'd have heads of scouting to come in and to play a part. Does it concern you at all the prospect of just going, right, Danny Rohl, you just go and pick 5 guys? Does that worry you at all? That, if it doesn't work, then you've got these 5 guys that are again pinned to one manager. That again, if Danny Rohl doesn't work out, you're having to clear them out. I mean, you're just caught in this doom cycle of hiring a manager, letting him pick his own players. It doesn't work out, you sack him. You need to get rid of these players again.
Is it any more concerning allowing Danny Rohl or trusting Danny Rohl to do it as it was trusting Kevin Felwell to do it? I mean, because ultimately Kevin Felwell's pretty much given the keys to the castle in the summer. His recruitment, a lot of those players were his recommendations to Russell Martin, his guys. You look at Shamiti being the obvious one. Clearly a Kevin Felwell signing. I think for that. Listen, I get the big picture. I get that modern clubs and the way football is now, it's sporting directors, head of recruitment. So there's that recruitment team behind the scenes, and the theory behind it is the manager is left to coach and work with the players. And look, I understand managers these days can't be going to games every week and scouting players and doing everything on his own. But I do think for this window, as I say, given the current state Rangers are in, and given the fact that Danny Rohl's went in there, he's been there 6 weeks now. He's already submitted a dossier, a report, whatever you want to call it, to the owners. Clearly kind of relaying his thoughts on the squad and where they are and what's required. So if he's working really closely with Andrew Kavanagh, which it looks as if he is at the moment, I don't think there's anything wrong with giving him this window. And the key thing is, well, clearly it's who he's going to bring in. I mean, you asked there, is it a risk? It's a risk with any manager. We don't know if Danny Rohl is good at identifying players because he's not the opportunity yet. What we do know is the group of players that he's working with at the moment are nowhere near good enough. I mean, your question today about how many players he needs, I mean, that might become an internet meme in the next couple of days because his response, I think it's already online. I mean, the look on his face, and look, we're maybe kind of jesting slightly, but I mean, the look on his face said he's thinking, I need loads of guys to come in because
I had that Donald Trump sort of meme going in my head, billions and billions. I mean, that's what he needs, frankly.
He knows. I've said before on here, I think he'll be privately. In fact, I'm pretty sure that he's privately kind of surprised and even shocked at the kind of level of player that's in there at the moment, the level of player he's got to work with. Injuries haven't helped because guys that I think he does quite like guys like Suter and Cornelius and people like that, he probably feels he can rely on. No, they're obviously injured now, which is giving them even more headaches. But as I say, it's just about who I think he's going to be very picky, very choosy. There's not going to be a lot of money to work with. They're going to need to try and wheel and deal, maybe get one or two of these guys who haven't cut it, try and get them back out the door. There's a question whether they can go and try and end a couple of these loan deals, like Max Aarons, like Giga, if he doesn't think they're good enough, if they can work something, if they've no future, or he doesn't see them being party at the second half of the season, Rangers are as well trying to get these loans ended. So it's how much of that he can do, and how much can a resource he can give himself to go and add players. And I actually don't think it needs a lot of money. I said to you earlier on, I would much rather than go to England again and pay over the odds for a Fernandez or an Asgard or a Gassama or whatever. That's where I think Danny Rohl will be very, very picky. I could see him maybe going and getting guys who maybe you wouldn't think of. They might be guys in Germany we've not really heard of. I mean, he used to be he was an analyst before he became a coach. He will know some of these leagues, obviously the Bundesliga in particular, inside out. And I think he'll be very specific in who he targets. Specific in the sense that he's saying he knows what the team needs. Talked about it today, in terms of that pace, not just physical pace, but speed of the mind in terms of moving the ball quicker and making better decisions. I think he knows specifically what he needs. He'll not be able to do it all in one window, but to get Rangers up, potentially challenging again, which looks unlikely this season, there's going to need to be changes, and I do think he's going to be in charge of it all.
I agree with you. I think that I can't see them come back to England and shopping as heavily in that market as they did this summer. I mean, I know under Niels Coppin when he was in charge of the recruitment, I mean, they actively steered away from England because of that very reason you're just discussing about, just how expensive and little value you get for it. They went to Denmark to get Mohamed Diamande, and his wages compared to some of the players that come this month are, a fraction. The same way, you go to EFTA, get him from Cyprus. Okay, it was from Brazil that they actually signed him, found him playing in Cyprus. Again, comes in a very low wage, low transfer fee, and they managed to multiply that by factor 5 or 6 when they sold him back to Brazil this summer. So, and also the big one being Hamza Gamani, being the absolute prime example of plucking somewhere from a really obscure league in Morocco, and again, turn it into a huge profit. So I would expect them to go back to that model, because I just agree with, I think, Yusuf Chermiti is absolute proof positive that value for money just doesn't exist in England. 8 million quid for a guy who, looks nothing like it. So, I mean, I think the danger with January, we were discussing this earlier on this morning, is that you can go and panic buy in January. And I think that's the danger this time. You can end up overpaying, and then that brings its own problems. If you've got a £1 million player that you've maybe had to spend 2 or 3 to get them in, and people start judging them on the price tag, that leads to issues. But just moving on for the rest of this month, I mean, he's obviously right now, Danny Rohl, he's got his issues. He's got selection headaches. He's without already John Souttar and Derek Cornelius. Derek Cornelius not back until end of January at the earliest. Souttar perhaps another 3-4 weeks out. Slightly better news on Mikey Moore. He's back perhaps the next couple of weeks. Dujon Sterling as well. Yusuf Chermiti missed the weekend, I think, through illness. He's back for tomorrow night's game against Dundee United. But the big news from the press conference today was the fact that Oliver Atman is out for 8 weeks, and also the possibility that you're going to see Nasser Giga and Mohamed Diamande miss some really big games, including potentially the Old Firm game on January 3rd, because they're away to the Rangers expect both to be called up, or in Diamande's case, Ivory Coast, and Giga Burkina Faso ahead of the African Cup of Nations. I mean, just what does that do for Danny Rohl's options, especially defensively, with, as I say, Cornelius and Souttar being out, Scott?
Well, it exacerbates the problem, and makes January even more complex. I would suggest. Like Giger's one of the loan players, so as I've said, I think they'll maybe look at trying to end some of those loans. Whether Giger comes into that category, I'm not sure. He's playing every week at the minute, but that's largely down to the fact that Suter and Cornelius are unavailable. Obviously, young Fernandez, I say young, 24-year-old Fernandez is in there as well, but at least he's a permanent signing. He's got a few years in his contract, so Giger's going to be interesting. Look, Diomande, I think, would be a blow to lose him for the squad if he does go to AFCON, because, look, I mean, there's fans will debate whether Diomande's been good enough, whether he should be a starter every week, but in terms of the squad, I still think he's a valuable kind of member of the squad. He has had good games. He's played in big European wins. Played in Old Firm wins. Like the Celtic game at Parkhead last year under Barry Ferguson, for instance, he was very good. So, as much as punters might not think he's a certain starter, I think they would like to keep him around the squad. So to lose him, if it's for a few weeks, December, January, I think would be a blow, given the kind of state the squad's in at the minute. I mean, you're just slightly to go back to the window. I mean, you're talking about no looking to England, and I totally agree with you. They should be looking at markets like Cyprus, Morocco, whatever it might be. Does Danny Rohl need to look in Scotland? Because he said today at the presser he wants players who understand what playing for Rangers is all about, understand the intensity and the pressure. Now, I would argue in the summer, Rangers missed that. I've spoken about this a million times on here. Missed big opportunities to go and get guys like Lawrence Shankland or James Penrice, and even Scottish players that weren't playing in this league. Scott McKenna and stuff like that. But if he's wanting guys that are suited to this league, does he need to look in Scotland? Does he need to look at Scottish players?
I definitely think it's an aspect of the Rangers squad that has been lacking for several years now. I mean, you think about that Steven Gerrard squad, there was a lot of imports, but there were guys within that team that knew what it meant to play for Rangers and the importance of how you approach games, and even just the local knowledge about it's like going to different grounds and the kind of hostility that you can face in away grounds. And listen, I mean, even the Rangers' successes of late in terms of recruitment, they've had issues with guys getting settled in. I mean, I remember last year Flip Clement talking about Hamza Gamani and how it took him a couple of months, moving from Africa, moving from Morocco, totally different culture, totally different climate, totally different, just an environment entirely. And that's before you even step in a football pitch and try to get your head around Scottish football. So if there's always going to be a transition period, and some players will cope with it quicker than others. But I think if you've got guys coming in from certainly that have that local knowledge, whether they're Scottish or not, but the fact that they've played in Scotland and are aware of these things, I think that negates some of the risk. Now, that's not to say that, take for example, Lyle Cameron playing for Dundee is in any way a preparation for playing for Rangers. I mean, they're, in some ways polar opposites. But I do think that lack of Scottish identity has been badly lacked in recent years. I think, as you say, Rangers have missed numerous opportunities to sign guys who would bring that Scottish flavour to the team, but more importantly, just know what it means to the fans. That they don't need to have this settling in period of a draw here's not seen as a good result, right? Okay, I get it now, but with the point they cotton onto it, you might only be 7 games in, as with Russell Martin found out, but 7 games in is too late. So you need guys that are aware of what's needed from the get-go. So I do think, listen, we've discussed the missed opportunities, your Doigs, your Lewis Fergusons, your Lennon Millers, the list is pretty lengthy. The guys that they should have been signed and weren't signed. So I think
It's a problem, Andy. I mean, as I say, I've been banging on about this for a while, and we were talking about it again last night. But you think that performance at the weekend, the draw against Falkirk, the biggest thing that upped fans who were there and angered the fans, you can sense it even with the fan media boys that were in the press conference post-match. The thing that annoys them the most is just that lack of urgency, lack of desire, lack of hunger and appetite to go and win games like that. I mean, I said it myself post-match on the Hotline Live. 20 minutes to go, Rangers are 0-0 at home to Falkirk. There's players walking to take throw-ins, and just no sense of urgency, no sense of what a victory might mean in terms of...
Especially the day after Hearts have dropped points. I mean, that's all the incentive they should need. I mean, listen, you should know a Rangers team should be, with the greatest respect to Falkirk and to John McGlynn, but a Rangers team, especially the amount of money that's been spent on it this season, should be walking all over Falkirk, especially at home. But the fact that Hearts have dropped points in a title race that really did look like it was beyond Rangers.
Exactly.
If they could have got a result yesterday, then I don't think it would be ludicrous to say that with a couple of signings, I'm not saying they're going to win the league, but they can certainly get themselves involved in the conversation. But again, it's a missed opportunity. And how many times over the last year, 2 years, have Rangers been presented a window of opportunity and they've refused to walk through it? I mean, I think I counted last season that it was about 6 or 7 times Celtic dropped points over the 2 previous seasons, and I think Rangers had capitalised on it maybe once or twice. I mean, it's a remarkable profligacy, if you want to call it that. They've wasted so many opportunities where they could ask questions of usually Celtic, but in this case Hearts now as well.
But that's the thing. That lack of hunger, lack of urgency. To us, that seems inexplicable. You can't quite get your head around that. Why, as you say, players wouldn't sense that opportunity, especially when other teams around you drop points. And I've been thinking about it, and what could be the possible reason for that? To me, the only reason is, and it goes back to it, we've said it before, is there enough characters in that dressing room, characters and personalities to be putting that pressure on players and relaying what it means and what a game like Sunday means or could mean in terms of getting them back in the title race? Is that message getting reinforced by, as I say, big characters, big personalities, big leaders in that dressing room? I'm not sure it does now. I don't doubt, James Tavernier has been there a decade. No, I don't doubt he'll be at it in that sense. I don't doubt Jack Butland, just for when we speak to him, he seems like that kind of leader type and would put demands on people. But beyond that, I don't see anybody else in that dressing room who've got those kind of characteristics. So I suppose that's why I'm touching on the Scottish thing, because I totally agree with you. I think Danny Rohl, he doesn't need to just rebuild a team. He has to rebuild a club's identity here. And that is a massive job. And a huge part of that should have been done in the summer, because it was the same case in the summer when Russell Martin came in, and we spoke about it, I certainly spoke about how I felt as if Russell Martin had to sign a new captain, and that was no slight on James Tavernier. It was more just if the club were going to move on in a positive direction, it needed change. I think he had to go and sign a new captain. We know he was trying to get guys like Connor Cody, who would have probably filled that role. But it didn't happen. No, they went and signed players, with all due respect, like Antman and Asgard and Magoma at 19 and Gassama at 22, 23. Those guys, even though they might have talent, they're not going to bring that. I don't think they're going to bring that real desire and that real personality in a dressing room to make Rangers successful again. And look, it's all right me saying go and sign Scottish players or guys that know what it means. I mean, they have to be good enough. That's the bottom line. First of all, they have to be good enough to play at Rangers. And this is where Rangers need to improve in terms of recruitment. No work has to be done on not just understanding a player's technical ability. It's about understanding their mentality and making sure they're ready to go and play for Rangers. But I do think, and as I say, they might have missed some of the best ones. Well, we know they've missed some of the best ones. Guys like Lewis Ferguson, Lawrence Shanklin, Josh Doig, Aaron Hickey. I mean, as you say, the list is endless. For some reason, there's been a real reluctance from Rangers and probably for Celtic as well to go and sign players in the same league as them. There's almost a kind of snobbery that these guys won't be good enough. I don't know why that is, because it feels like every other league in Europe, the big clubs will go and cherry pick the best players from other teams in that league. Rangers have been very reluctant to do that. I know they've picked up maybe in the last 10 years Ryan Jack, Connor Barron, Leo Cameron. Can't be too many more than that. Unless you
Greg Stewart, Jordan Jones are the only ones that sort of.
So
you just think about Rangers teams in the 90s. As much as there was guys signed from abroad for big money, but there were so many players at that time that were, that became stalwarts that were signed domestically. Walter Smith's second spell, guys like Kevin Thompson, Stephen Whittaker, Broadfoot, Naismith. I mean, all these guys Chris Boyd were signed for, and it's important because not only does it strengthen you as a squad, it weakens the teams right about you, and I think that was such a key to it. I'm for you, and the key thing for me is that the guys that knew what the club meant and cared, more importantly cared. I think that's a definite thing you can throw at this team. Do they care enough? I'm not saying they don't care. I'm not saying they don't care that it doesn't matter to them if they win or lose, but do they care enough? Is there any way that losing a league title will hurt Jayden Magoma as much as it would hurt somebody who's born and bred and a Rangers fan, or even if they're not a Rangers fan but they live in Scotland, their family's got to put up with that. They've got to defend their family's pride and their friends' pride and the people around about them, that they've got to go into their work on a Monday after an Old Firm defeat or a big defeat in Europe or something like that, and take stick for off their mates. I mean, I think there's definitely an element of that, and people might say, "Oh, football's moved on for that sort of thing." It's now about other things. There's tactics and there's analytics they get involved in, but a very human nature. I think that is a huge part of why guys like Barry Ferguson, why Chris Boyd, why Kevin Thompson would run through a brick wall for this down the years, because it would matter to them, and I think that's why I just don't see enough of that in this Rangers squad. I hadn't seen enough of it probably going back 3 or 4 years. I mean, as I said, that Gerrard team, you've got Alan McGregor, you've got Ryan Jack. Stephen Davis isn't Scottish, but grew up a Rangers fan. Kyle Lafferty at the time as well. I mean, even Greg Stewart coming in, Scotland. Yeah, Scotland, exactly. So, I mean, plenty of guys that, knew that if they didn't get a result, they themselves were going to get stick off of the people that they grew up with, their pals, or their brothers or sisters, or their mum or dad. So I just think that's a huge element, and it's an easy win for them. It's difficult to say within the league right now who would you go and get, and even if they're gettable, and we'll know Lewis Ferguson, what did he go to Bologna for? A couple of £2.5 million?
Yeah.
I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Aberdeen are looking for maybe double that. If it's Rangers in Scotland, so we know there's a premium to be paid. But there's opportunities. You say Mulligan coming through Dundee before he goes to Hibs, Shanklin on a free. And they are just absolute no-brainers, and the club allowed them to slip through the finals for.
The thing is, Andy, it doesn't need to be. They don't need to be Scottish necessarily, or Rangers fans. I mean, listen, if they're a Rangers fan, that probably helps. And of course, you don't fill the team with them, but you need that core in there, which Rangers haven't got. But as I say, it doesn't need to be Scottish, and that's why I was going to say today, I was actually quite impressed with Fernandez in the press conference, because I'm not saying he's good enough to be a Rangers centre back, right? Or he's going to go and do this or that at Rangers. There are still big question marks. I think a lot of the fans aren't convinced by him, especially after spending 2.5.
He's raw, but he's definitely raw, yeah.
Peterborough, he is raw. But you know what I quite liked about him? he has got that hunger in him, I think, to go and succeed. And in the kind of interview we did with him the day, he spoke about his background. I mean, this kid came for nothing. He's without a club, playing non-league not that long ago. You're only talking 5-6 years ago. Fights his way back, earns a move to Peterborough, and whatever he's done at Peterborough, rightly or wrongly, it's tempted Rangers enough, or Kevin Thelwell enough, to get in and sign him for $2.5 million. And look, of course, there are big improvements to be made in his game. He admitted that himself, which I also found quite encouraging, because for me, probably his biggest fault is his kind of lack of concentration at times, those kind of lapses. And it was funny.
Just a bit casual for me at times on the ball. Yeah, just
laid back. Yeah. But I thought that was good. Somebody asked him about Danny Rohl improving him. I thought it was quite encouraging that he said the first thing Rohl said to him was, "You need to improve your focus," and he showed him clips. And to be fair to Fernandez, he said, "I've looked at it, and he's right. I do need to improve my concentration levels." So if he does that, he might become a better player, and he might be good enough for Rangers in time. But I just quite like that. He talked about kind of understanding now what the club was all about, and I believed him. Whereas I think a few players have said it. A few players have come out of that press room this season and said it, and you've not really believed in them. Guys that have come from England, and as I say, were probably told, "Listen, come up to the Scottish Premiership and you'll walk it." And it hasn't quite happened for them. So I was quite encouraged by Fernandez. I'm not saying he's the answer, and he's going to do this or that, but as I say, at least he's got that kind of bit between his teeth. He's a permanent signing. He's still only 24. There's at least something to work with there, which isn't the case for a lot of them.
No, I mean, listen, that obviously he spoke about that, playing non-league. I think it was 7th or 8th. I think maybe in the 8th year in Scottish English football, he was sort of sunk into, as you say, during COVID. So I asked him about, to sort of sum up his journey since then. The fact he finds himself playing Europa League last week, and there's a humbleness to him, which I think is refreshing. I think there's a lot of guys, there's a lot of footballers you meet these days that you don't really get that vibe from them, and they don't seem to appreciate what the game's given them. I think he definitely does. I think there's an appreciation that he has to work for everything he gets, and he'll have to continue working if he's to make it here. I mean, listen, as you say, it's very early days. He's done okay so far. He's not been. I certainly think the Rangers have got bigger issues at centre back with the man alongside him, Nasser Giga. If anything, he's looked the more reliable of the two. But he has to keep working at it. I mean, as I say, there's rough edges, quite a few of them that need to be knocked off if he's going to crack it up here. But he's got the attributes. I mean, at 6'4", I mean, he's a man. What is it, 6'6"? Sorry, I think he's a man mountain. Whatever height he is, and he's obviously he's a fairly good weapon to have at set pieces. He obviously gets. I think he's got a couple of goals now. He scored against Iowa and Livy last week as well. So. But you see, I would just like to see him a bit more alert, even just a wee bit more. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. Just a wee bit more.
Intense.
Yeah, just a wee. He just seems, as you say, so laid back. He's almost horizontal for a guy, whatever height he is. If he was any more laid back, he'd be horizontal. I mean, I would just like to see him be a wee bit more wired in. Because I think there are times where. I think he's trying to portray an image that this is easy for me, and then I think that's the quickest way to get caught out when you allow people to look and go, all right, okay, well, let's see how you deal with this, and then they sort of put you in your backside. So I think I would like to see him just step up as you say, his intensity levels, maybe 5 or 10%.
Well, look, he's going to start, no doubt. I think at Tannadice Wednesday night, we'll be there. It's the start of a really hectic schedule for Rangers. A lot of tough games before the January window even opens, culminating obviously in Celtic away on January the 3rd. But before that, Dundee United away, Kelly away. They've got Hearts away, 20th of December. They've got Hibs at home, which is always tough. How do you see Wednesday night going? But overall, how difficult is this period going to be for Danny Rohl, given the injuries? given the fact the window's not open yet, and given the fact he's got what he's got to work with.
I think it could be tough. I mean, as I say, I think you could see. I wrote a couple of weeks ago that there's probably going to be a wee bit more pain in store for Rangers, and yeah, they've had a couple of not easier fixtures or winnable fixtures, but the fixture list was certainly kinder than the last sort of fortnight. But I think you're going to see things ramping up throughout the month of November and December when you've got, I think it's a trip to Tynecastle in there, a trip to Rugby Park, obviously tomorrow night, the Tannadice. They've got a away game in Budapest against Ferencváros. You know, everything leading up to that Old Firm game in January the 3rd. There's, you know, going to be some really tricky encounters, and you would listen. These are always tricky venues, especially when Rangers aren't playing well. But I think in previous years you've always thought, well, they've got a goal in them. That's the thing you can't really say about this team right now. You struggle to see where they're getting goals from, and you know, okay, they've stiffened up the back line ever so slightly the last wee while since Danny Rohl's come in. But if they fall behind, if they lose a goal early, you really struggle to see where they're going to get themselves back level. So that's why I think it's vital that they can try and, you know, keep things tight, and clean sheets are absolute must over the next few weeks. If they find themselves being opened up, then I think they could be find themselves coming unstuck. So listen, Danny Rohl will be desperate to get through this run of games as quickly as he can with as little damage done. I mean, he was talking today, you know, if he can have a repeat of what his first 5 league games, 13 points out of 15, then he would reckon that'd be a decent return. I think he'll be doing very, very well if he can get anything like that over the next few weeks.
I think you're right. And I think this is where Danny Rohl, probably the focus will be a bit more on him in the next few weeks. And whether that's fair or not is up for debate. But
Do you think it's fair? Do you think it's fair that when you're already seeing a few folk pointing fingers at him and go question why you know, I'm not an XG man, I don't think you are either, but I've seen some numbers doing the rounds that I think the XG last year it went from something like 1.46 down to 0.78 this season. That basically tells you that they're creating effectively less than one clear-cut chance per game.
You can't judge Danny Rohl properly to get some of his own players in. However, that doesn't just give you a free pass. I mean, loads of managers need to come into clubs with a squad that's already there, and you know, really good managers, really good coaches improve them and make them better. You know, make individual players better. If we're being honest, and it's only been 6 weeks, so again, it's maybe a wee bit kind of unjust, but you know, I've not really seen that with this Rangers group. I've praised them on here, you know, previously, and I stick by it. I do think he's made them, you touched on it right at the start, I do think he has made them more structured, more organised. I don't think they give up as many chances as they did under Russell Martin. They don't look as susceptible to counter-attacks.
Well, they're not playing the sort of suicidal stuff out from the back. I mean, they're playing the percentages on a far more regular basis.
So he's improved that side of it, but we've yet to see what a Danny Rohl team looks like going forward. And unfortunately, with the players he's got, that's been difficult for him. I mean, just a wee kind of added thing. I mean, Mikey Moore's injury's been a blow to him in that sense, because you know, just when he started to find a bit of form, and he really looked like a kind of Danny Rohl type player, and you could tell there was a good kind of chemistry between the two of them. The two of them were kind of speaking about each other. And you know, Rohl was talking about how good Moore had been. Moore had talked about how good the new manager had been after a really difficult start to life at Rangers for him. So it'll be frustrating for punters and for the manager that Moore has been injured. They need to try and get him back as quickly as possible. But I do think it doesn't matter what the squad looks like. It doesn't matter that the window's not open. If Rangers were to go and lose at Rugby Park and lose at Tynecastle on the 20th, maybe draw at Hibs at home or whatever, no, the pressure will come, because it always comes on all firm managers. You can't. It doesn't matter how bad a team you think you might have. If you're dropping points in the league and you're drifting away out of the picture for honours and titles, then pressure's going to come. And
I think you'll find that I remember saying in the summer that Russell Martin would get a period of grace if he was showing signs of progress. And obviously, forget progress, they went in the wrong direction at a rate of knots, and that's why he was out of the job so quickly. I think there is clearly a realisation now, especially that this is a failed squad. It's been a failed rebuild over the summer that Danny Rohl hasn't got much to work with. So he will... I think it's an easy thing for Danny Rohl to always turn around to, or his defenders, if you want to say that, be able to turn and go, but look what he's got to work with. So I think he'll get to January without too many fingers being pointed at him. But I tell you what, if the guys he signs come in and don't hit the ground running or perform to the level that the guys that are there already, then you're absolutely right. He'll be the next in the firing line. And then that's why Rangers have to pray that he can get it right, because otherwise the doom cycle that they've been on for 4 or 5 years just continues, heading into the ground like a dart, frankly. And
also, with no sporting director and no chief exec to point the finger at, I think you've mentioned this before, that the owners are leaving themselves or have left themselves pretty.
They're naked right now. They've got nothing to cover themselves up without.
It does go pear-shaped for the manager and the January window doesn't go the way they hoped or planned, then they are very open. The fans will then, the players will get it, obviously, but they will turn on the manager and ultimately the owners, if they get it wrong again. And look, that might be, I don't think they can fix everything in one window, but as you say, there has to be tangible improvements there. The fans need to see some things going right. I mean, we were laughing the other day talking about when was the last signing that came in that actually made a big impact? And what was the last signing that actually came in and thought, wow, he's a cracking player? No, he just hits the ground running. I mean, looking back, I don't mean maybe include like Cherny in that, but I mean, he was alone.
Cherny was going to be the guy I suggested, but again, he had these moments where he struggled early on, where it took him a while to get settled in, and that's what I'm saying. Like, again, we've discussed this one. For me, it was a no-brainer to sign him again, especially if you're wasting £8 million on Yusuf Chermiti. £5 or £6 million would have got you Václav Cherny, a guy who'd been here a year, enjoyed the club, again, had settled in, and crucially knew what it meant to play for the club. So, listen, decisions that should have been so straightforward have been muddled over the last few months, and this is what it comes down to. What Rangers need now more than anything is clear, clever, proper decision making.
Yeah,
you can't afford to muddy things again and get muddled up and tangled up and making the wrong calls. They need a perfect window, frankly. Whoever they bring in, they can't have a one where it's a 50% success rate, strike rate. They need every guy who comes in to be a success. So, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens over the next few weeks. But it's I'm not convinced that even 2 or 3 guys coming in would make a difference. I think you're talking about this squad's at the very least 5 or 6 players away from being competitive.
Yeah. Well, look, we could probably sit here all day and talk about Rangers' problems. Need about 5 podcasts to do that, but we've got stuff to do. We'll be at Tannadice on Wednesday night. You'll be at Rugby Park on Saturday, so we'll see how it goes. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned to Record Sport, all the usual social media channels for all your Rangers news, and we'll catch you again next week. Cheers.